When I was 6 years old, I read the Kit Kittredge American Girl Love books for the first time. In the books, 11-year-old Kit, who was growing up in the Great Depression, wanted to become a journalist. This inspired me to become a journalist, and whenever I told people I wanted to become a journalist, no one dissuaded me from the field or told me it was not a respectable career to pursue. However, I can only imagine how today's future potential journalist feels as they are told that they should distrust journalists and all journalists publish fake news. There have been several issues that have plagued the field of journalism since its beginning. Today, issues like fake news and the shift from traditional to non-traditional forms of media often plague the industry. However, there is one issue that has existed in journalism and America since its beginning, and that is the lack of diversity in the field. I believe that there are two things keeping young, diverse journalists from the field. First, the negative reputation of the journalist, and second, the lack of diversity in the newsroom. However, I believe that if we encourage young, diverse journalists to pursue the field, then they will diversify the field, they will tell a more broad range of stories, and they will regain credibility to the industry. The reputation of the journalist has varied throughout American history. During the American Revolution, the British Empire disliked journalists because they often published anti-British sentiments in their papers. However, the American colonists liked journalists because they were fighting for their freedom. After America was founded based on the principles of freedom of press and speech, we see organizations like the New York Times rising in the 1800s, and these organizations are really taking advantage of the freedom of press and speech that they were honored to get, and many people are reading the news during the 1800s. However, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we see yellow journalism begin to plague the industry, in which journalists are often exaggerating stories or telling mistruths in order to sell papers, and many people did not think journalists were credible. In the mid-1900s, some people trusted journalists while other people did not. However, after journalists broke the Watergate scandal in the 70s and Nixon subsequently resigned from the presidency, many people began to see journalism as more respectable, and many people began to pursue the industry. However, in today's anti-media climate, we see people from both the right and left not trusting journalism. The lack of diversity is also keeping young people from the industry. Diversity has obviously been an issue in American history since its beginning. In the 1960s, we see the civil rights movement and second-wave feminism battling racism and sexism in America, and we see people of color and women gaining more rights and gaining more respect from the American public. However, we are still not a perfect nation, and we still struggle to be completely diverse. In 1978, the American Society of Newsroom Editors made a pledge that by the year 2000, the percentages of journalists of color and women journalists would reflect those of America. This was not met in 2000, and they set the goal back to 2025. However, it looks like they are not going to meet their goal because as of 2017, 37.7% of all bylines were written by women. People of color only made up around 17% of the newsroom, which greatly contrasts the roughly 40% of Americans who identify as a minority. And Black, Hispanic, and Asian women make up less than 5% of the modern newsroom. So this is causing a very harmful cycle in which there are few female journalists and journalists of color. Therefore, they are not telling diverse stories. Not as many diverse stories are getting out there, and there's not as much coverage of America as a whole. And therefore, women and minority groups do not feel that they are represented at all or accurately in the news. Therefore, they mistrust the field and they do not want to pursue it as a career. And therefore, there are few female journalists and journalists of color. And this harmful cycle can be broken. And I believe that the way to break that cycle is by recruiting young, diverse journalists to enter the field. So how do we combat negative reputations and the lack of diversity? First, we must recruit young journalists at high school and college levels to pursue the field. We must train these people so they become great journalists, and then they can cover a diverse range of stories, and we must encourage them at a young age. Second, we must teach all young people, no matter who they are, the value and importance of journalism and how it reflects American principles of freedom of speech and press. And I believe that if we do these two things, then the field will regain credibility and become more diverse and inclusive and reflective of America as a whole. Thank you.